Sports. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff, coming to you a half an hour later because we just like to keep you on your toes. Half an hour later and a little sleepy after a 9:40 Orioles start last night. They're out in Seattle, so it's the West Coast start times, which is just not ideal.
Yeah, I was in bed by like 1:30 after finishing the social shift. Yeah, it was a late night, but still got the win. It was a slower game offensively, but huge game pitching-wise.
Yeah, Grayson Rodriguez looked awesome. If you did stay up for that game, you got to see somebody who looked the part of a future ace in this Orioles staff. Another late one tonight, a 10-10 start, but it does see the return of Dean Kramer, which is big for this Orioles rotation. Kramer had been out for a few weeks. We haven't seen him start since, I think, late May. He's been out since. Has made a couple of rehab starts with the Norfolk Tides. Numbers don't look awesome. I don't really care. His last start with Norfolk got up to 75 pitches. That was really the only goal. It's not like Dean Kramer is trying to prove something in AAA. He's just trying to get his pitch count up and get back to the place where his arm feels good enough to be pitching at the big league level.
Yeah, it's hard to convert those numbers from AAA to Major League. I mean, it's going to be different hitters no matter what. So I think tonight's a good chance for him to kind of showcase his health, how he's doing right now, and we'll kind of play it by ear. And with so much news going around this Orioles starting rotation over the past few weeks with Bradish, and then even the bullpen with Coulomb. So just a lot of news topics hitting this rotation, and this will be kind of a good starting point, or not starting point, but kind of a check-in on the rotation to see how they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, because you have the top two guys in the rotation in Corbin Burnes and Grayson Rodriguez that have been rock solid all season long, and Dean Kramer hasn't profiled as a number one, number two type of guy over the past few seasons, but he has been a really steady presence in this Orioles rotation for the last few seasons now. Made 32 starts last year with a 4.12 ERA, 22 appearances in 2022 with a 3.23 ERA. So getting Kramer back, yes, not necessarily as a Corbin Burnes, Grayson Rodriguez type of ace, although Kramer does have starts every once in a while where he'll give you 7 innings, 10 Ks. Like, he is the type of pitcher that can do that. But just hopefully with all things going well health-wise, he can be another piece of consistency in this starting rotation that the Orioles, unfortunately, due to injury, just have not really had.
Yeah, and it's a sign of depth for this starting rotation that the Orioles do need. It's been known that the Orioles do need some starting pitchers come the trade deadline. So, but this, at least for now, is a good sign of, okay, let's get back to some depth in the rotation, see how he goes. Like you said, the rotation right now, Rodriguez has been lights out. Corbin Burnes is coming off of paternity leave, so we'll see him come back for the first time tomorrow night. And then Cole Irvin was a little bit scary recently. He went 20 strikeouts and 6 walks in the last 6 starts. So that one's a little bit iffy. So it is good to have Kramer back into the rotation. We'll see how that goes. And then obviously Albert Suarez coming off of a huge 6 scoreless innings against the Rangers. So some ups and downs with this starting rotation, but it is good to have Kramer back in there.
Yeah, Irvin, as you mentioned, has struggled a little bit in June, but he was really solid at the beginning of the year. Albert Suarez had 2 rough starts, comes back with a really nice bounce-back start, 6 innings shutout, like you mentioned. Dean Kramer, when healthy, is not giving you as many question marks as somebody like Cole Irvin or Albert Suarez, which is nothing against those two guys. They have performed really, really admirably throughout this season, but initially, going into the year, you thought their role was going to be in the bullpen because of the depth that this starting rotation had. That depth has really, really been tested, and Irvin and Suarez have been pushed into a role where they have had to start every 5 days. They've done a really, really good job of it, but Dean Kramer, just somebody that you feel a little bit more comfortable with in that role. Not that Irvin and Suarez haven't performed admirably, but Dean Kramer is the type of pitcher that can give you 25-plus starts and an ERA right around 4 year in and year out, which is just a nice, consistent piece to have.
Yeah, and it could be that you get Kramer back. He's completely healthy, playing super well, and then by the trade deadline, get another starting pitcher and then maybe push Suarez back into the bullpen, which would be kind of really comforting to have him in the bullpen in that case scenario.
Right. So we will see what the Orioles decide to do with their starting rotation, if they go 5-man, if they go 6-man. The 6-man was kind of the plan for June when you had no off days. So we'll see if the Orioles decide to go back that route in July. Remains to be seen. But today, Annie, wanted to talk about some of the guys at the AAA level who, it's weird to talk about in a way, and we'll get to it, where there are so many players competing for playing time at the big league level right now, where it is a very nuanced conversation when you're talking about Jackson Holliday and Coby Mayo, because they deserve to be up in the big leagues based on the numbers that they have been putting up in AAA. But where do you find room for them is the conversation we're going to have. But I think it first starts with a guy who seems to have worked his way out of that conversation a little bit, and that's Heston Kjerstad. I mean, you never know what's going to happen week to week in terms of guys performing or slumping or whatever, but Heston Kjerstad deserves to be here right now. Entering last night's game, he was hitting .300 with a .999 OPS. He had the huge grand slam here last weekend, which ruled on Hawaiian Shirt Night. He is up to the 20th ranked prospect in all of baseball, according to MLB Pipeline. He is hitting like it. And as of right now, over the last 2 weeks, he has one of the most dangerous bats in the lineup. So is there a good answer for me in terms of where he plays every day? Does he fit here? Does he fit there? I don't know. But as of right now, you got to find a place to put him.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this last week when it was fresh with having Kjerstad back in the big leagues, where it's a good issue to have where you don't know where to place these players because the depth is that good.
Yeah.
So it is a good problem to have, but I completely agree. I think he deserves to stay in the big leagues right now. I mean, literally anyone you talk to, they'll say that his pure hitting is just so good.
Yeah.
And just to have that praise from players like Gunnar Henderson on his raw power, with someone that's kind of just came up in the last 7 games with the Orioles. And even you have him getting intentionally walked in the game where he had the grand slam. So it's just to have him back this soon and making that much of an impact, it's like if it's not broken, no need to fix it.
Right.
No need to change where he is right now and what league. So I do think he deserves to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a case where, you would like to see the defense get a little bit better. He's not going to be an elite defensive right fielder. Okay, the bat is so good that you just need to find a place for him in the lineup. As we mentioned, we had this conversation a week ago where it was, where does he play? Because Colton Cowser is a left-handed hitting outfielder, elite defensively. Maybe Kjerstad gives you a little bit more offensively, but Cowser still having a really nice season. Believe he's tied for the rookie lead in home runs. That's still a really valuable player. Cedric Mullins, left-handed hitting outfielder. Anthony Santander is a switch hitter. There's not a super logical place for Kjerstad to fit in, but over the last few weeks, we've just seen him fill in as, okay, this guy needs an off day, or Ryan Mountcastle was sick for a few days, so let's get Kjerstad in there. It doesn't always need to be a clear-cut, this is the role that this player fills, but he's just good enough to be in the lineup. So whether it's giving guys more off days or just shifting positions around, whatever it may be, you figure it out, because he deserves to be in the lineup more often than not.
And there's going to be a lot of shifting in the lineups with this issue. I mean, again, good issue. And then you also think about Kyle Stowers down in AAA. Just the depth is unreal in the outfield. And for someone like Stowers, who broke the Tides record with 53 career home runs, he doesn't have much to prove down there, but it's where you place everyone. He can come up now after his 10-day minimum. But when you have Kjerstad playing so well and batting so well right now, then Stowers has got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan on Facebook commenting, Cowser needs to be sent back down. No, he doesn't. He's really good. He's one of the best rookies in baseball. Let's talk about some of the guys that are in AAA. Jackson Holliday and Coby Mayo. Jackson Holliday is back from injury. He is, by the way, I don't know why fans have all of a sudden started to almost sour on Jackson Holliday. He's still the number 1 prospect in baseball per MLB's updated top 100. So this is not a list from the beginning of the season. No, they updated it less than a week ago, he's still the number one prospect in baseball. He missed about 2 weeks with inflammation in his elbow. He has been the designated hitter for the Norfolk Tides for the last stretch of games. That's probably going to be the case for a little while until the elbow gets back to feeling 100%, and he can make those throws from second base. In the 5 games going into last night since returning, he's got 4 hits, including a double and a home run, 6 walks, which is good for a .455 on-base percentage and a .955 OPS. The reason that we're talking about Jackson Holliday now is that there was recently a story from David Hall, who is a Norfolk reporter, where Holliday was quoted as saying, "I'm going to take some time and get the elbow all healed up to hopefully make a run at the big league team after the All-Star break." Which begs the question, where is Jackson Holliday fitting on this big league roster?
Well, before we get into that, I think you're right. People are a little too quick to judge him. I mean, He only had 34 at-bats in the majors. That's not a lot of time to prove yourself. And you completely different players and positions, but you see a little bit of Adley Rutman in him in terms of at the plate, very patient, really great reads on the ball, on the pitch. And then when you take a look at Adley in his first 10 games in the majors in 2022, he was batting .179. When he was called up.
And was much older than Jackson Holliday was when he got the call.
So you have to give a little bit of time for Jackson Holliday to develop, and kind of the Orioles farm system has a plan for him, and we don't know if that's the Orioles' plan of having him back after the All-Star break or his in mind, but in terms of what kind of adjustments you would make to have him fit into the rotation, you got to look at who you have to bring down. And if that's Jorge Mato, you do lose a lot of value in speed and defense in the infield and kind of a consistent player in terms of a position player.
Right. And Holliday, we know now that the plan is going to have him be your second baseman. I think an interesting part of that conversation is whether or not you need him to be your everyday second baseman. He is the best prospect in baseball by many rankings, and you would like that guy to play day in and day out. We saw that as the plan at the beginning of the season. It didn't work out in the way that you were hoping it would. The numbers were not as good as you were hoping, but his numbers in AAA, at least since he's been back in, again, the small sample size, the 6 games since returning from injury, he has a .500 on-base percentage. He walked 3 times last night. Like, the guy, maybe he doesn't have enough opportunities to even really hit the ball because he's walking so much.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing exactly what you want him to do in AAA as, again, a player who is still really young to be at that level. He's still 20 years old and is dominating AAA pitching right now. Yeah, you would like to see the power numbers go up a little bit, but he is still playing really, really well at that level. And I think making a push towards the big league roster after the All-Star break is a realistic expectation for Jackson Holliday. In terms of the fit, again, do you need him to be that everyday second baseman? Development-wise, I think you would say yes, because you don't want to hinder Jackson Holliday's ability to hit left-handed pitching down the line. Let's say there's a scenario where you are platooning him with Jorge Mato. Mato hits lefties really, really well. Jackson Holliday has hit right-handed pitching really well this year. If you were to platoon those two guys, I think there's a question of whether or not you are holding Holliday's development back a little bit by not allowing him to go through the struggles facing left-handed pitching at the big league level.
Yeah, and it would kind of be like, again, when you bring him back, I mean, the first time didn't have much of a shot to prove himself. It would kind of be very similar here if you were to switch them on and off for at-bats, whether you're giving Holliday enough chances to be able to kind of, like you said, go through the motions and kind of feel comfortable with both types of pitchers.
Right.
But I do think that, I mean, there's a lot of talk that Holliday getting brought up in the beginning of the season was rushed for his development progress, but I do think that regardless, it's a matter of time, or it's a matter of whether he can stay confident enough to be able to perform well at the big leagues a second go around. And because it is a lot of backlash for him already as a 20-year-old. So he just needs to be able to maintain confidence with any type of pitcher.
Yeah, the conversation around whether or not he got called up too early is a weird one because it's very results-based. I think Mike Elias and the front office would tell you that they're probably happy with the process that got them to the decision of calling Jackson Holliday up when they did. There was a serious conversation about whether or not he was going to break camp with the team and be on your opening day roster. So I think the process for calling up Jackson Holliday was a good one. If he comes up and hits 275, we're not having this conversation about whether or not they called him up too early. So I hesitate to use the results of how he looked at the big league level to evaluate whether or not it was the right decision, because he showed you everything at the AAA level that I think you needed him to warrant that call up. In terms of where he would fit and the logistics of what would happen, I don't think Jorge Mateo is going anywhere. He is still a really good hitter against left-handed pitching. This year, right-handed pitching, he's got a 626 OPS, but against lefties, he is hitting much, much better. And you can keep him in the lineup as your second baseman against lefties. He is a huge threat on the base paths. He is an excellent defensive second baseman. You're not going to lose that kind of value, especially down the stretch. So who Jackson Holliday would get called up for, what roster move you would make, I don't really know, because everybody at this level is contributing in a solid way right now. It's going to be the same conversation that we have when we talk about Coby Mayo here in a minute, but I don't have a good answer as to who Jackson Holliday would replace, because I really don't think Mateo can go anywhere with his production against left-handed pitching and what he gives you. Even if his role is as a defensive replacement pinch runner type of player, that's still really valuable down the stretch.
Yeah, and it is going to be a really, really similar conversation that we're going to get into. But you have two guys who deserve to be in the majors, but again, it's like picking the pieces of where each one belongs and whether the Orioles are willing to part with Jorge Mateo or Ramon Arias in splitting at-bats or even kind of having them replaced almost. So it is an interesting conversation. Again, not a bad problem to have. But Holliday, for me, I don't know if I foresee him coming back sooner than, or coming back to the majors sooner than a Coby Mayo chance.
Right. I mean, Holliday, he has the advantage over Mayo of having already been here. So the Orioles have shown that they have the confidence with him to be at this level. And regardless of how soon it happens, you still have to like the mentality from Holliday, where it's, I'm trying to make a push at the big league club as soon as possible. I want to contribute to this team down the stretch. I do think there is a scenario where Holliday could be an upgrade at second down the stretch. Jorge Mateo has started the year really nicely. We saw his numbers take a little bit of a dip in June, had just a 619 OPS. Still a really, really valuable player, but we saw it in 2023 where Mateo started off the season really hot and tailed off as the season went along, and we saw his role change. I think there is a possibility that a similar thing happens in 2024. Mateo missed a little bit of time with an injury in the middle of June, so who knows how much that contributed to his numbers taking a little bit of a dip, breaking up his rhythm a little bit. Hopefully Mateo gets right back on track, and it is a much more difficult conversation of where to put Holliday, but it's a possibility that down the stretch, if we see a similar trajectory for Mateo as we did in 2023, that Holliday could feasibly be an upgrade at that spot somewhere down the line this year.
Yeah, and with Holliday, it's kind of a give and take because you don't know how he's going to perform in the big leagues, not only at bat, but also in the infield defense-wise, because you do have such a strong player in Mateo in terms of speed and defense in that position. So it is kind of a give and take, and whether you have him follow the similar track as he did last season or continue to push this season at bat, which is a lot better than last season too. So it is just a wait and see.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard conversation whenever Holliday continues to push in that way. It's not going to happen all that soon because, again, he is still rehabbing his elbow. He is not throwing a ton at second base. He can throw with the right elbow, he said. He feels pretty good. They're just being cautious with it and haven't put him in the field yet. So he has been the designated hitter for the Tides in his last 6 games with a .500 on-base percentage. So the numbers are certainly good enough to where he is healthy and he is doing all of the things you wanted him to do development-wise at that level. There is certainly going to be a conversation to be had down the stretch. There's also one for Coby Mayo. So we'll have that conversation now too, because Mike Elias on the Norfolk Tides broadcast a week or so ago said that they have essentially been looking to try to figure out how to find time for Coby Mayo at the big league level. Elias said he is pretty much ready. They feel confident in what they have seen from him. The defense has progressed at third base. It's still not consistently solid. You would like to see Mayo cut down on the errors a little bit, but clearly the Orioles are happy with what they have seen from Coby Mayo defensively. And since he has returned from injury, he's also hitting approximately .800 with 3,000 home runs. So the bat is certainly ready to go. It looks like it is ready to go at the big league level. But again, there are so many questions at the big league level. Once Mayo, if he were to get here, where does he play? Because there is just not a ton of room for playing time at this level right now.
And I think it is a similar conversation with Kjerstad also, because you have 2 players that are playing really well at the bat right now, but in terms of getting them on the field, that's another conversation, because you have Mayo, who does a lot of his damage against pitches in the zone. He plays really, really well and makes really good contact on four-seam fastballs. So you have that value in Mayo, but then you also have value in Ramon Arias and other people like Mato, who could also play at almost any position on the infield, because you have those players who have that experience in terms of speed and defense and also throw accuracy, which is a concern for Mayo also.
I think it's easy to look at somebody like Ramon Arias, who fills a similar role to Coby Mayo. Mayo is a top prospect in the game. Ramon Arias is not starting on this team every day. It's easy to look at that and say, well, just call up Mayo and there goes Arias. But I would really pump the brakes on that conversation for a few reasons. First being, Ramon Arias is still a really valuable player. He gives you, in the past, has given you Gold Glove defense at third base. He is a very solid defender. We have seen that pop up recently as Arias has come in as a defensive replacement at third base, made some really nice plays, whether he's starting games here or there. He is a really solid defender at third. No, the numbers offensively aren't awesome. It's a .625 OPS hitting .217. Yeah, that's not a starting third baseman on this team right now, but that's because it's Jordan Westburg, who's probably going to make the All-Star game. But if your solution is just to say, okay, let's give Coby Mayo the playing time that Ramon Arias is getting, I don't think you would actually be happy with that.
Yeah.
If you looked at the specifics of how often Ramon Arias is playing, he only has 138 plate appearances this year in 48 games. He had a stretch in mid-June where he was starting at third base a lot because Jorge Mateo was injured. You shifted Jordan Westburg over to second base, so Ramon Arias was starting at third pretty much every day. That was only the case because of an injury. In the month of May, when everybody was healthy, Ramon Arias got 25 plate appearances. You don't want to do that for Coby Mayo.
Yeah.
This is one of the best prospects in the game, and I would rather see Coby Mayo, as much as I would like to see him in the big leagues, in a hypothetical world where he can get a bunch of at-bats, awesome. 25 plate appearances in a month for Coby Mayo, even if it's at the big league level, I would rather see him play every day at AAA. And yeah, maybe he is outperforming that level and deserves to be in the big leagues, but you shouldn't just go, okay, well, there goes Arias and here's Mayo, because it makes sense position-wise. When you really break down where Arias is playing, the value that he gives you as a defensive replacement, that's not what Mayo would give you. And maybe Mayo gives you something better and something different, But you can't just go, let's replace one guy with the other, because they're two very different players.
Yeah. And it's also going to be a similar issue because if you bring Mayo up and you're only giving him 25 at-bats in a month, he's going to get criticism. Say he doesn't play well in those 25 at-bats. Look at the criticisms Jackson Holliday got.
Or Kjerstad a month ago.
Yeah,
it was the same thing.
34 at-bats. So you're going to have Coby Mayo come up. He's going to have 25 at-bats in 1 month. Say he plays similar numbers to when Jackson Holliday came up for the first time. Then what? People are going to say, oh, bring him back down to AAA. So you want to be able to give him enough of a chance to be able to have consistent numbers at bat, similar to how Holliday, it's a preference to have Holliday have more chances at bat. And it's also another conversation of, well, does Mayo really have a place on this team without any injuries? So if there's an injury in the infield, then sure, then it's a clear choice. Bring Mayo up or Holliday, or try and work something out to see if then maybe there's a need for him. But right now, with Urias and Mato, you do have a lot of value in those two players defensively in the infield, and without an injury in either of them, knock on wood, it's a bigger issue to talk about.
Yeah, and there are probably other ways that you could feasibly work him in. I mean, Mayo makes sense as a right-handed hitting designated hitter, but that's the role that Adley Rutman has been filling this year, and he's been really, really good at it. Like, one of the best in all of baseball at it. Adley is hitting over 400 as a right-handed hitter, an OPS over 1,000. And oftentimes, what you have seen Brandon Hyde do is DH Adley Rutman against left-handed pitching. So Adley would be in the lineup as a right-handed hitter. And then that's when you start James McCann at catcher, because James McCann, as a righty, you would like to see him in the lineup against left-handed pitching. And I guess you could say, well, just catch Adley on those days. And, James McCann hasn't been hitting as well. You could try Mayo at DH. But then you're losing the preservation that you have for Adley Rutman. I think the Orioles and Brandon Hyde have done a really nice job this year of keeping Adley Rutman off his feet a good bit. We've seen Adley DH a lot, and that is going to help you down the stretch, not only of this season, but probably of Adley Rutman's career as well, where you're just keeping him off of his feet a little bit, making sure that the bat is in the lineup day in and day out. If you start DHing Coby Mayo, James McCann is still going to need to fill in for Adley Rutman at catcher. So now you're talking about a scenario where if Coby Mayo is your right-handed DH, then what, you want Adley Rutman out of the lineup more often? That's not a good solution.
Yeah, and there's also a ton of players that are filling that designated hitter role right now with Ryan O'Hearn, who's hitting really well also. Yep.
Mountcastle, Santander.
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you going to pull out?
Yeah, it really is. I think the two themes of this season so far have been a plethora of depth in terms of outfield, infield, but then a lack of depth on the pitching front. So you have two completely different sides of the coin where you do have all these players that are getting really good numbers at bat right now, but also playing super well defensively in Colton Cowser, who is also somewhat fighting for time at bat right now with Kjerstad in the mix. So you do have a lot of people who can play that designated hitter role and are doing really well right now.
Yeah. I think there are avenues where Coby Mayo could get playing time. It could turn into a similar scenario with Heston Kjerstad, where it's, okay, we don't really see exactly where he's going to play, but if the bat's hot, we'll find a way to keep him in the lineup however we need to. I know prospects are exciting. I would also just pump the brakes on being too eager to just say, okay, Ramon Urias, Jorge Mateo, we'll take away your playing time. Those are still two valuable players. Ramon Urias is a excellent defender at third base, and Jorge Mateo, excellent defender at second base, great speed. Those are valuable players to have on the roster. And Coby Mayo, for as much as we like him, that's an unknown commodity. Jackson Holliday, for as much as we love him and as much as we think he is going to succeed at the big league level, he didn't for the first stretch, is the fact of the matter. That's not to say that he won't come up at some point this year and play really, really well. I believe that he has all the ability in the world to do that. And Coby Mayo, same thing. I'm not saying I don't believe he's going to come up and hit well. I think he has that kind of potential. We have seen it at AAA. There's nothing else to prove with the bat. But Urias and Mato are solid players that we know they fill a specific role, and they are good at it. Coby Mayo and Jackson Holliday, a ton of upside. We don't know what they're going to give you in 2024. And you're trying to win games. You're trying to win a division. You're trying to win a World Series. Don't push out good veterans just because there are exciting guys that are unknown commodities.
Yeah, and good veterans and consistent veterans. I mean, you may not be getting a lot of offensive production right now from Mato, but if you look at his overall time, that is a consistent player for the Orioles and someone that you can pretty much trust out there in the infield and in defense.
Oh, yeah.
And for Urias, you can trust his versatility, too, because it's not just like he's stuck on third base. Like, he can play second base, first base, and you have that type of versatility in a player that you might not be getting out of Coby Mayo because you haven't seen it yet, too.
Yeah, so I know these guys are going to be hopefully up at some point this season. I think the conversations around where they play are a lot more nuanced than just, well, get rid of this guy, get rid of that guy. So we will see what happens down the stretch. One other player that is definitely worthy of talking about isn't in the same echelon of prospect rankings as Coby Mayo and Jackson Holliday. That's Chayce McDermott. He has struck out 28 batters in his last 3 starts. He's got a 3.58 ERA with the Norfolk Tides, striking out over 13 batters per 9 innings. The walks are still a bit of a question mark. It has gotten better since the beginning of the season. He's not walking as many guys, but that number is still over 5 batters per 9 innings. But 121 strikeouts in 83 innings. Whew, that plays.
Yeah, and I think he is a really valuable prospect for an Orioles squad that does need some pitching depth. I mean, first off, Julio Teheran opted out of the Orioles contract and wants to try the free agency route. So Chayce McDermott would most likely be the next man up in that category. So you have a pitching rotation for the Orioles that does need depth, and you have Dean Kramer coming in. We'll see how that goes. But should Chayce McDermott get the call up, you do have someone who last season batters hit 167 against him. He is coming off of a career-high 12 strikeouts yesterday at Norfolk. So this is a guy who is coming into conversations more and more lately, and I think that his name is becoming more prominent, and I think that we could see him throughout this season make it into the big leagues, but it's just a matter of what the Orioles end up doing with pitching rotation. So I would like to see how he does in the big leagues against major league batters, because that 167 last season against minor league batters is all said and done until you get to the big leagues.
Right. And if Dean Kramer didn't come back, I think this avenue would be a little bit easier to find a place for Chayce McDermott, especially because Albert Suarez and Cole Irvin, as we mentioned, have been stumbling a little bit over the past few weeks. Suarez had the big bounce back start, as we mentioned. Cole Irvin has had a tough stretch in June. Hopefully he just bounces back and is still giving you a solid start every 5 days. But Chayce McDermott, his upside is immense. He's got to throw strikes. He's got to keep the ball in the zone. But that was the same conversation around Cade Povich at this time a year ago and even at the beginning of the season. It was Cade Povich has really, really good stuff, but he just needs to stop walking people. He needs to put the ball in the strike zone, trust his stuff, and then we could start to see Cade Povich get into the conversation as a big league starter. And we've seen that now, where Cade Povich, he has had a few starts in the big leagues where the location and command isn't quite there, and he has walked too many guys. But overall, I think you're pretty happy with what you've seen from Cade Povich through 5 starts. I think Chayce McDermott, those two have been lumped together because they were traded for at the same deadline. They've moved up through the minor league system together. I think McDermott belongs to be in that same conversation with Povich. You would still like to see the walk numbers go down, but the strikeout stuff is there, and that's what plays at the big league level.
Yeah, I mean, Povich is coming off of a game where he pitched 5 innings with 0 walks, so that's a plus for him, but he did have 2 earned runs. So it is just Povich needs some more reps there and some more trial and error for him to see just how well he is doing on the pitching front in terms of getting strikeouts and minimizing the walks. But you do have a decent run from him there last time out, and I do agree with Chayce McDermott. He is lumped into that conversation because you do have two young guys who are trying to kind of forge their path in a rotation that looked really, really good at the beginning of the season and fell to a lot of injuries. So it's kind of not unexpected that they need to come up and prove themselves because that's their goal anyways. But it all hit at once. So they do need to be able to prove themselves in these two young guys in where they can fit in the rotation.
Yeah, it's possible that we wouldn't have seen Cade Povich had it not been for all of these injuries. Probably would have seen him at some point in 2024, but I don't know if I would have predicted that he starts 5 games in June coming into the season. So Chayce McDermott could find himself in a similar conversation in a few weeks if the Orioles rotation continues to have some question marks, or in a few weeks too, we've got the trade deadline coming up. So that rotation could get shored up and make the path to the big leagues a little bit more cloudy for Chayce McDermott. He's got enough strikeouts and has good enough stuff where we could potentially see him in the bullpen down the line, especially into the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chayce McDermott on the playoff roster, but we'll see. This is a crowded roster at the big league level, but there are still really exciting prospects that could be on the way. Jackson Holliday and Coby Mayo are two of the best prospects in all of baseball, and the fact that the Orioles are in as solid of a position as they are in at the big league level and could still have those two guys contributing down the stretch, it's exciting. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time, especially with the draft coming up. You don't know who the Orioles are going to take there, what kind of position. But then revolving around this prospect discussion, there's lots of good stuff in the Orioles farm system that is known to be so good anyways.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens in a few weeks. All of these logjam conversations tend to sort themselves out, whether it's through injuries or whether it's through trade. We could see some of these logjam situations sorted out in just a few weeks at the trade deadline. We have a busy few weeks here at MASN All Access. We are just about a week and a half away from the MLB draft. And if you have been following along with us for the last few years, this is our Super Bowl. So we are going to have a lot of great draft content coming your way. We will be live bringing you up to the Orioles draft pick at number 22. We're going to have tons of analysis. We talked with Sig Mejdal, Matt Blood. We're going to have a live interview with Mike Elias after the Orioles draft pick is made at number 22. So make sure you are following along with us live next Sunday, the 14th, as the MLB draft. The Orioles have, again, pick number 22. We're going to bring you all the analysis. And make sure you're checking out the Bird's Nest with that nice updated graphic that doesn't have Matt Bonaparte on it like it did last week. We are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you so much for commenting along. We love reading your comments as we go here. Or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on the Bird's Nest. Boy, that was a mouthful of things to get out.
A lot talking today.
We're going to have a draft preview show for you next week. There are a bunch of really good prospects that could be available for the Orioles at number 22 and number 32. Shout out Gunnar Henderson for that number 32 overall pick that the Orioles have. So we will have a full draft breakdown for you next week here on the Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.